Okay, fine, I'll talk about Vampire Academy, but I'm not going to be happy about it. I just watched episode 9 of Vampire Academy, and God, it was so bad. I really did want to root for this series so bad. I wanted it to be good. I wanted it to surprise me after my reaction to the pilot. If you're here following my reaction to the pilot, hi, how are you? My name's Gia. I'm a 25-year-old lady who lives in my mom's basement. I create booktube content and Twitch content here on the internet. And I do a series called Revisiting YA that I am technically starting now. This would technically be the first episode. So because Vampire Academy has 6 books, I spread it out into 2 sections. I am only about a quarter of the way through Shadow Kiss right now. I have not reread books 3 through 6 in a very long time. It is like rereading it for me for real, but I have read the first and second book more than twice. First book, 5 stars, still slaps. Second book, 4 stars. Feels like Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 1. It basically feels like a camping trip. Also feels like a filler episode of an anime, but it was good nonetheless. It was also a good 4-star read for me. I'll probably get more in depth about how I felt about the books in the own separate section of the video, but I wanted to go ahead and document how I feel about the series right now because my emotions are at a peak. Let's get a move on. So again, I wanted this series to do well. The pilot episode took easily a decade off my life. Like, I felt my life force being drained from my body after seeing that. As a book reader and as somebody who did go into the series blind, I had hoped that it would be more adapted from the books. The movie was very, for all its faults in that, I think its main issue was tone. Other than that, I saw nothing really wrong with it. Maybe that's a hot take and I'll dive into it later. But the movie, at the very least, was extremely faithful to the book content. So when I watched the pilot episode and I saw how different it was, it stressed me out like a lot. My reaction to it was visceral and extremely negative. I was intending to give it a fair shot. I gave y'all an update from episodes 2 through 5 about how I felt about it. I've been catching up. So I've seen 6, 7, 8, and 9 in the last evening. I've just been watching them all in a row. And I feel like what they're doing, I've done a little bit more of a digging. So this episode was ordered as a straight to series instead of a episode by episode basis. So this is a way for television companies and media companies to basically spend less money over a course of time. It was very apparent. The way that I found this most evident is if you guys listen to the music soundtrack, and this is going to be such a specific nitpick, but me and my besties, my IRL besties, are fanfiction girlies, or at least we were back in the day. At least my best friend and I, we engaged with the 365 Days movies out of irony because the first one was so fanficky, it was camp. It was like After, but the evolved version. It was just like you watch After and you're like, this feels like Wattpad. 365 Days felt like the same thing. It gave the same energy. It basically gave Mafia AU, if you guys have ever seen the 365 Days movies, the first movie soundtrack is basically the actor who plays Massimo's debut album. Me and my best friend have this inside joke that like you can tell it's a sex scene that's about to happen because the Massimo actor is the one who's singing. This becomes more evident later on in the movies where we were tallying sex scenes versus like miniature music video montages. In the first movie, it was basically like all of his songs. Literally, he was the only one on that soundtrack trying to get his fucking Grammy, okay? But then movies 2 and 3 had more songs, and it was like half the Massimo actor and then half Fiverr artists that were just explaining the plot through song. Like, we in the club, we drive slow, we doing things that the girls don't like that. Like, I'm not that vibe, but like think they're in a club and you just hear a song about being in the club. We're giving it all tonight. We're partying it up tonight, and this is the last night of our lives, blah. And it's a song that you don't know. It's very obviously a song that was conscripted by like a Fiverr artist. Like somebody went to a Fiverr artist and said, I need a song about like being in the club, and this is what they produced. That is the soundtrack to Vampire Academy, and it is so bad that it takes me out every time. It really like takes me out of the moment. But that's besides the point. The whole issue with the, at least with the political intrigue, is that Lissa is the head of the Dragomir house now that her family is dead, and now they're wondering if her family's death was an accident at all. So trying to figure out if this was an orchestrated event. First, sorry, spoilers, spoiler bot right here. Trying to find out if her family was murdered or if they truly died in an accident. So Lissa is then disqualified from being a part of the council of all the head families, and her vote is taken away from her because she's the only member of her family left. So there's this whole subplot about how she needs to get married to somebody, another royal, that is basically related to her enough that she can get her vote back, which is so weird and odd and gross. Which one of you am I most related to? Okay, let's get married. Like, okay, so she has this like allyship with Jesse Zeklos, who is a villain in the books and in the series, but he becomes like, he's a very minor threat in both. Like, he's literally just a fuckboy. Like, he's literally just there. He poses no threat. In the series, I do kind of feel bad for him though, because his dad is an abusive dick, but in general, he's pretty harmless, and he's just, he's just kind of there. But she has this kind of partnership with him, but she doesn't really want to marry him. And then she ends up asking Christian to, even though there was no previous indication that like he had just enough Dragomir blood to marry him when he wasn't on the list of candidates to begin with. That's a little weird. So I found that to be a bit plot holy, but Lissa has to marry somebody to get her vote back to be on the council. And then on top of that, her sort of uncle, Viktor Dashkov, is trying to become king, but he is sick. So his daughter Sonia is healing him through her spirit, but it is slowly driving her more and more insane. And the fact that Mikhail was turned Strigoi and then killed by Rose, she's also grieving him. And then you have Tatiana, who in the books was already queen. She was like this old queen. Like, the Queen Marina in the series didn't exist. This entire like subplot was kind of sort of elaborated on and fabricated. Like, the political intrigue didn't happen until later in the series, but this character Tatiana was already queen when the series started. What you end up having is this conflict because the Strigoi are going after the Moroi, and there's like more and more attacks, which is something that does happen in the books. That's something that's being covered right now, is there are more and more Strigoi attacks, and they're trying to figure out a way to stop them, while the more traditionalists and neo-fascist and conservative side want to basically conscript a child army of Dhampirs and novices to fight their battles for them while they sit in their little castles and do nothing, because they don't want to risk their lives and think that like learning offensive magic is a sin or that it is an abomination or something. Whereas you have the more leftist basically side that is like, no, we need to learn how to defend ourselves and learn how to fight alongside our guardians. Like, we're not useless. We need to be able to fight with them, because we're not going to basically sign up children to die for us when we can fight our own battles. We just need to choose to do so. So you have these two very opposite factions of the Unionists and the Elementalists. And the Elementalists are also connected to the church because Tatiana's aunt is one of the 12 grand priestesses or whatever of the kingdom, province, I don't remember, Dominion. Tatiana convinces her aunt to not put her vote behind Viktor if he is the chosen heir by the queen, because it's becoming a separation of church and state issue. So the queen brings this up and says, I can't have the ruling queen and the ruling priestess be from the same family, because it's a conflict of interest. That's, separation of church and state here. So instead, Marina pulls a fast one on them and says, we're basically going to do like a bunch of trials, like a trial by combat, trial by Veritas serum. I don't know. So there were a bunch of little trials that they had to do, and basically whoever won was the one that was chosen. Well, Viktor wins, and turns out it's all for nothing because Tatiana has been plotting behind the scenes. And it was so obvious. I knew from the beginning that it had to be her. I knew it had to be her, that she was the one plotting all this. So she is the one that has been plotting all the Strigoi attacks to target Moroi royals so that she can be in charge. And for what? What is your end goal here, ma'am? I'm a bit confused as to what your end goal is, because your desire is to have a war with the Strigoi, saying that we allowed them to go unchecked, but you're the one that's allied with them. So you're basically going to kill off the Dhampirs by making them Strigoi food. And then what does that leave you with exactly? I'm a little confused by her motivations. I don't think that they make any fucking sense. And then at the end of episode 9, you find out that Andre is still alive, which I don't know how the fuck that's possible. And that really that really set me over the edge. Let me talk about some of the things that I liked. Christian killed his dad. Amazing. That was awesome. Thank you. I am starting to enjoy Mia as a character. I do like her. I think that she is a sympathetic character. I like her a lot more than her book counterpart, at least where I am in the books right now. She does become a lot better as of the end of book 2 into book 3. She becomes a lot more good. She becomes a part of like the good guy squad. And I'm liking Mia a lot more now than I was prior. The actress for Lissa is absolutely killing it. She is awesome. Give her an Emmy. I remember what my favorite part of this entire series is Adrian Ivashkov. King. Honestly, best and the only actually good thing about this series is Adrian. I think that he is refreshing. I think that he's a lot of fun. In the books, he's a lot of fun too. You have a lot of sympathy for Adrian because he is a spirit user who has had nobody beside him this entire time. He doesn't have a Rose. He doesn't have a guardian. He comes from a really big and influential family, but he doesn't have his own Rose to kind of help him and guide him through the darkness of the spirit that it brings him. So he self-medicates. And you have a lot of, honestly, now as an adult, I have a lot of sympathy for that. Like, he's cognizant of the fact that he is using these things to numb himself. You really feel for him and you want him to do better and you want him to find something else, because obviously self-medicating with drugs and alcohol is not good, but it's what he's had to do in order to survive. And as we saw with the different ways in which people with spirit adapt and use their circumstances to fight off the madness, like Sonia becomes Strigoi, which is a very extreme choice to make, whereas Adrian just drinks and smokes, and Lissa has Rose, and Saint Vladimir had Anna. So it's you see all the different ways that not only spirit can manifest, but how the manifestation can affect you, but then also the different powers that you can have with spirit. Adrian doesn't have the power to heal people, or at least he hasn't kind of unlocked it, I guess, or he hasn't evolved to have this, but he can dream walk, which is something that Lissa can't do, and he can see people's auras, which is something that Lissa can't do. But she kind of overloads herself when she is giving healing to Victor, that she wakes up and from passing out and realizes that she can see the darkness around Rose. And this is when she realizes that instead of passing her darkness to Rose, because spirit comes from within, the spirit that she uses comes from herself, and then she leeches it from other people that are closest to her. So Rose and herself are Lissa is a rechargeable battery, and Rose is the extra rechargeable battery, your little thing that you bring with you when you are going on a road trip and you're not going to have anywhere to plug in your phone, so you bring a battery pack. That's what Rose is, and it's the sense of Lissa's spirit power, which I thought was a really interesting concept. But anyway, back to Adrian, a icon. So Adrian is on this journey to kind of figure out what is going on with spirit and find other spirit users, and Lissa attempts to use compulsion on him, and he sees right through it because he can use it too, and he's also immune to her. They kind of cancel each other out. So he is extremely interested in learning what she knows, and he has this vast art collection, and what he's doing is he's collecting iconography of and religious texts of Saint Vladimir, trying to basically get to the bottom of his story as like the patron saint of their religion and everything that they stand for. He's trying to get to the bottom of Saint Vladimir's story because he suspects that he was a spirit user, but he is missing part of the panels. So in the Catholic Church, they have all of these like iconography panels that show like different parts of stories of the Bible, and they come like, it's almost like in an arch, but it has like 4 different panels, and they're usually at the altar. So they're very famous examples of this. I can insert them here. They are very beautiful. There's something very similar like this in Vampire Academy, at least in the TV show, except it is the story of Saint Vladimir. The 4th panel cannot be deciphered. So they have, at this point, become unable to know what the last part of it is. But they track down somebody who might know. She is somebody who is frowned upon by the Elementalist Church, who is kind of seen as like a heretic, who is saying things about Saint Vladimir that they don't really like that much. They go talk to her, but unfortunately they lead Strigoi right to her, so they have to escape. But we find out after, this woman gets really bitter and blames Lissa for like bringing Strigoi to her because she's been on the run because the other Moroi like don't want her around, and they think that she's like a heretic who needs to be tried for treason and basically be K-worded. Because they led the Strigoi right to her, she's mad and bitter that they ruined her life. So she tells Lissa exactly what she wants to hear. Like, why is everything like this? Like, what was so bad that the church wanted to cover up about Saint Vladimir that she is trying to tell them? And it was because worst sin that could ever be committed in the eyes of the elementalists is resurrection, because it goes against nature, because they are, fire, water, earth, and air. They are very like stand-ins for the elements of the world. And resurrection and necromancy, as we know in other magical systems, is the worst sin you can commit. I mean, look at Full Metal Alchemist. Need I say more? So you have this concept of resurrection being the ultimate sin, and Rose had been resurrected by Lissa after the car crash, and Lissa didn't even realize that she did it, but this is what awakened her spirit, and this is what caused Rose to be bound to her. This is also what caused Anna to be bound to Vladimir. He saved her from drowning, like when she was a kid. This becomes a vital part of the story where she realizes that Rose is only alive because of her, but now like she's sucking the life out of Rose literally. Instead of passing along her darkness to her, she's sucking the life out of her, which is a different form of a symbol. Instead of rubbing off on somebody, that's something that you have an effect on, that like you can stop with yourself. With Lissa dampening her magic and not using her spirit, she can stop herself from spreading the darkness to Rose. But sucking the life out of her, that is something that she may not have control over, because she needs life to live herself. Like, that's a survival tactic. If your body has the choice to survive or not, it's going to. So when Lissa uses her magic and she continuously sucks the life out of Rose, that's not really something that her body can help, which is why she pushes Rose away. At least I think. I think that that's a pretty good analysis of the situation. Overall, I still think that the Rose and Lissa dynamic is done quite well despite being adapted from the books. I think that it's still pretty similar and representative of their dynamic as best friends and as basically bonded soulmates. Another thing I really like about the series is now that I've seen 9 out of the 10 episodes, I'm loving all of the representation. In the books, Rose is biracial, and I don't really remember anybody else besides that. But in the TV show, most of the principal cast outside of Dimitri are people of color. That's awesome. I love that. I mean, you got the L's, you got the B's, you got the G's, not the T's yet, but season 2 could come out soon, or at least maybe. I don't know if I'll watch it, but maybe. Oh, one more thing. Rose and Dimitri, that shit pissed me off. First of all, the main issue with them as a couple in the books was that Rose was a minor. And in the series, Rose is still a minor. Okay, so I just went to look it up, and there is actually no definitive answer as to how old Rose is in the TV show unless I missed it. The only thing I found was like a quoted, not a direct interview, but like a article about an interview from CC Stringer, who plays Rose in the TV series, that says that Rose is of age in the television series, but it doesn't say how old she is or how old Dimitri is. But the main issue in the books was that Rose was 17 and Dimitri is 24. On top of that, he was also an authority figure to her. He was her mentor. That was another problem. But then the other problem was that if they were both going to be Lyssa's guardians, they could not be romantically involved themselves because they have to put Lyssa first. And if they loved each other, then they would put the other before Lyssa. And that would go against like what they've been trained to believe as guardians. So that was kind of the trifold of reasons as to why they were not together for the longest in the books, until after, of course, until much later when Rose was older. The books place a lot of emphasis on the fact, or at least Rose places a lot of emphasis on the fact that Dimitri is 7 years older than her, but she doesn't harp on the fact that she's a child. In the books, she takes her job very seriously, and he realizes that the only way for her to stop acting like a child and stop acting impulsive is to clue her in and treat her like a functioning adult and like somebody who takes their job seriously instead of somebody who needs to be kept in the dark. But then she ends up being petty anyway because she's still 17. But in the TV series, they're being really ambiguous about her age in a context where he's still an authority figure to her. This is still problematic. I've mentioned it before. My relationship has a 7-year age gap. 7 years is not that big of a fucking difference. So when Rose is harping on the fact that he's, 7 years older than her, oh, he's so old, it's like, no, that's not the point. The point is that you're a fucking minor. If she was 20 and he was 27, it would not be an issue. This being 7 years apart would not be an issue. Part of the whole point in the books was combating the fact that they knew that being together was wrong because of her age. But they were not together until after she was an adult. They basically did what Pretty Little Liars didn't, in that in Pretty Little Liars, Azria knew that it was wrong for them to be together because, they were 15 and 24, but they still were together despite being 15, 16, and 24. There's a difference. I find it problematic that this was not mentioned. If it was mentioned that they were like in college and this was where the Moroi were sent to like specialize, that would be different. Like their major was like their specialization in whatever element that they have or something, but then that would bring up issues about, using offensive magic and stuff, because that would be like, what would be the different classes for the different elements be? Like what? Anyway, I'm getting off topic about how they could have made this better, just to make a problematic relationship less problematic when it was still going to be problematic afterwards. This TV show gives me a headache. It just baffles my mind how much they fucked this up, and I don't understand how it's getting positive reviews. And like I wanted to root for it so bad. Like I wanted it to be its own thing. I wanted it to have its own life. But when you change the source material so drastically, it becomes its own thing. It becomes its own universe, and what they've created is not good. Honestly. Like if you had not read the books and you watched this series, I don't want you to think this was a reflection of what the books were, because I haven't finished my reread yet as a 25-year-old lady, but the books still slap. At least the first and the second book still slapped. I don't know about the third yet. I'm only a quarter of the way through it. I still have to finish it. But they're still good. They still hold up, at least in my opinion. Could I potentially be looking through them through rose-colored glasses? Yeah. Yeah, I could be. But I'll explain that later when I do my retrospective on the books themselves. Besties, when I tell you this shit was bad, it was bad. Like, I've emotionally detached from it enough that I'm not seething mad. But at the end of the 9th episode, when I found out that Andre was still alive, when I tell you I fucking screamed, and not in a good way, I was so mad. It took me 2 hours to wind down and go to sleep because it was so bad. So, episode 10, we find out not only Andre is alive, but he has been helping Tatiana with this rise to power because he's trying to protect Alyssa, because Tatiana is threatening Alyssa. We also find out that kinda sorta Tatiana is not Moroi, she's a Dhampir. They allude to it. She's able to get the upper hand on a Strigoi, that Andre has this realization that she's not a Moroi, she's a Dhampir. She's just been posing as a Moroi in order to gain power. And he made a reference to the fact that she never talked about like the things that she would do once she was in power. It was always what she would do to get power. So I think what they're doing is like trying to posit this revolution of overthrowing the Moroi as the leaders, and so the Dhampirs can be the leaders, which I don't really understand their logic there. I don't understand this theme for a revolution. You could have just kept her as a Moroi and just kept her as a fascist dictator, and she still would have been just as terrible. You still had the scene where they figured out that the silver stakes are imbued with spirit, so Lissa and Rose imbued it with spirit in order to close the wards. They did have the battle with the Strigoi invading campus, but it wasn't the campus of the school, it was the like government buildings. So this put everybody at risk. Somebody poisoned the queen. I mean, I already had issues with the fact that this queen didn't exist in the books. Like, this was a completely different queen, because in the books, Queen Tatiana Ivashkov is the queen, but we have Queen Marina, I don't remember what family she's from, Queen Marina, and then Tatiana Vogel. She's completely different. Like, she's just a completely different character. Like, the Vogels are a royal family, but she's not a part of that family. She's supposed to be part of the Ivashkovs, so I don't understand where this fucking came from. So you had that. The priestesses in the church, like, that never existed. This whole separation of church and state problem was never an issue. At least I don't remember it being an issue. So the whole, like, because in the books, the priest was the one who, like, told them about the books that they needed to read about Saint Vladimir, but he really didn't have much political power. At least I don't think that he did. You have all this mix of elements that they came in from the book and then all this original shit, but I just feel like what they did is just take a lot of things from the books and make it the direct opposite. Andre was supposed to be dead, now Andre's alive. Now, I was worried in the fights with Dimitri and Rose with the Strigoi that when Dimitri got bitten, that was when he would be taken away and turned Strigoi, because in the books it was fundamental. It was fundamental that Dimitri was turned Strigoi against his will at the end of Shadow Kiss, and this became a major thing that carried on for a long time, like at least throughout book 4 and I believe into book 5, not to spoil anybody, but this became absolutely central to the story of Dimitri being Strigoi. Like, this arc has to last 3 more books from, you know, him being turned in book 3 and then where he ends up in book 6. So I was worried that he would get turned there, but he ended up getting out fine, and instead they decided to turn Andre, which, first of all, he wasn't even supposed to be fucking alive, and second of all, to make him the one that turned Strigoi just made everything a bunch of fucked up. I was also mad about the fact that every time Rose was experiencing, like, feeling a Strigoi nearby, she would just double over in pain. In the book, she just had a nauseous feeling, but in the series, she just would, like, immediately, like, keel over and, like, almost fall to the ground. And I'm like, how logical is that of a experience? Because, like, if you're nauseous, like, I can imagine, like, if you're Rose and you feel Strigoi nearby in the books, you are nauseous when they are nearby. But when you are in a battle and there's a bunch of them around, like, wouldn't you just be nauseous the entire time? Whereas with the series, when she feels this pain and she doubles over in pain, she only feels it when they're nearby. But what happens when there's a lot around her or she's in battle? How is she able to perform in the battle if she's in that kind of pain? So I don't really understand the decision to make it like that. I mean, sure, portraying nauseousness with a show don't tell is a little difficult sometimes, but how can you just do, like, keeling over in pain as your tell when she then has to get into a fist fight with these undead vampires? How is she supposed to do well or survive or do anything if she's feeling that amount of pain being near something that's dead? So I don't really understand the decision to make it that instead of the nauseousness, because it makes no logical sense. Like, Rose would be the worst guardian alive because she would just be laying down writhing in pain if she just had a bunch of Strigoi around her. Another thing that bothered me is that Mason like freezes in the middle of the fight and then he's thrown against a rock, and I thought he died. I was like, oh my god, like he is dead by being thrown against a rock, a rock wall, and he like breaks his neck or something, and that's how he dies. That's so pathetic. But then at the end of the episode they're like, by the way, he's alive. And I'm like, he's alive? When in the books his death was so traumatizing to Rose and Eddie and Mia that it became a fundamental issue that they had to deal with for the rest of the books, is their grief and PTSD and survivor's guilt over the fact that they couldn't save him and that they lived on without him, and that Mason then helped Rose throughout Shadowkiss because he came to her as a ghost. So like, I don't understand how this exists. I don't understand, because like, how can you then I don't understand this show, because it takes a character that in the books was dead and they bring him back and then make him Strigoi, Andre. They take a character who was alive but turned Strigoi against his will and make it so he wasn't, Dimitri. Then they take a character who died in the books, make something happen to him that almost got him killed, but then keep him anyway. That's three different characters with three different book statuses and show statuses that are completely opposite of what they were in the books. This is what I mean by they literally took whatever happened in the books and they flipped it. This was the other oh my god, I'm like absolutely losing my shit. In the books, Lissa's darkness is what happens when the spirit becomes too much for her to handle. So she bleeds the darkness into Rose, who then feels the effects of it and becomes irrational, manic, angry, the like. But it is talking about darkness and how the darkness is what comes with spirit use. In the TV show, instead of it being darkness, they say that spirit is the use of someone's light inside them. So Lissa generates her own life force and her own light that she uses to generate her power. But when she is low on light, she siphons it from Rose and steals her light. So in the books, it's she bleeds darkness, but in the show, she takes Rose's light. Do you see the difference? It's completely opposite. It's completely opposite. It makes no fucking sense. Rose leaving St. Vladimir's Academy in the first place because she realized that like she and Lissa need to learn how to live without each other. She would never, Book Rose would never. She always put Lissa first. This becomes a major thing at the end of Shadowkiss when Rose decides to drop out on her 18th birthday and she decides to hunt down Dimitri, and Lissa catches up to her and has a bit of an immature hissy fit about you're choosing him over me and you love him more than me. And it's just like, why are you being so catty and irrational about this? She's not. Rose says, I'm choosing myself because I always choose you. But she's not, though. She's not choosing anybody over Lissa. She just has to do this because it's what she promised Dimitri she would do in the event that something like this happened. So I don't understand why Rose absolutely leave Lissa behind to go live in the human world for some fucking reason and just go hang out in the human world because she needed to get away from Lissa, and then she ran back to go save her. That pissed me off so bad because Rose would never walk away from Lissa on purpose just to say like, all right, I'm just going to go like hang out in the human world. For what? For what? If at least in the books when she left, she was leaving to go on a mission. Like she left because she was doing something, not because she needed to be away from Lissa. There was no part of their book relationship where they were at odds with each other and they left each other on purpose. Because they would never do that, because that doesn't make sense. They're bonded, they're best friends. That makes zero sense. This series is a disaster. I swear they took everything about the books and flipped it and made it its opposite. Characters that are dead are now alive. Characters who turned Strigoi were not turned Strigoi. Characters who were turned Strigoi are now human. What is happening here? What is going on with this? This doesn't make any sense. I don't know how Richelle Mead could have greenlit this, because I had people telling me on my pilot video that Richelle said that she agreed with the decisions that they made here, and when they fundamentally changed so many things about her books. Because if it were me, if I were a writer and I created something that I loved that much, I would be heartbroken if someone changed it that drastically, because it's fundamental to your identity as an author, and they took it and ruined it. And honestly, the viewers agree, because it's not doing too hot with the critics. So maybe it'll get canceled and we can forget about it ever happening.
Gia from the future here, because I did not do an outro for this video. When I originally set out to make this video, it was going to be all in one, where it was going to be my feelings about the show combined with a plot summary / retrospective on books 1 through 3, basically being revisiting YA episode 1 of Vampire Academy, because the first season of the series was going to be loosely adapting books 1 through 3, so I was just going to combine it all together. But when my show rant was getting up to be about an hour before I trimmed it down, and then my plot summaries for the books was capping out at about 2 hours to talk about 3 books, I ultimately decided that splitting it into 2 separate videos was probably going to be my best choice, because not for nothing, I am a smaller creator, and I am starting to notice that my my reading vlogs that are shorter tend to get a little bit more traction. So I'm going to try to shut the fuck up from time to time and not speak as much on certain things, and learn how to be a bit more concise with my delivery, because it's showing that the longer I'm making the content, yes, I'm getting my point across, but I can probably say it in a much simpler and shorter way without being so exorbitant. With all that being said, next week's video will be the revisiting YA books 1 through 3 of Vampire Academy. I've already started editing that footage. Let me know down below in the comments how you feel about my analysis. Overall, while I wanted to root for the TV series, I think the ultimate changing up of people's backstories and statuses at the end of season 1, and mixing up the plot basically to the point where different things are happening at different times. So yeah, there might be the same things happening in the series and in the books. They were happening in different orders, so it completely told a different story. So I think that it really just changes the entire message of the story and changes the delivery of it entirely. And as a book reader, I find that to be extremely disappointing, because, you know, the way that the story is told involves the delivery and involves the order in which the story is told. If I were to give this series a rating on a scale of 1 to 10, like Moist Meter this bitch, I would probably give it between a 30 to 40%, just because while it did have elements that I wanted to root for and there were things that I enjoyed, on the other hand, the way that they delivered it mixed with some of the issues with mixing up the plot and changing things entirely from the original text, it just messed with my love for the series too much. Maybe I'm just being a little bit of a purist and I need to get over myself when it comes to it, but I just read the books side by side with watching the series, and it's clear which one is better to me, even a decade after reading the books. So my plot summary and book analysis of books 1 through 3 will be out next week. Remember to drink water and be nice to each other and exude kindness and empathy with everything you do. I am starting to stream more consistently on Twitch. Be sure to check my Twitter for my schedule. It changes every week depending on my work schedule and depending on what I have going on. So it's not consistent, but I am streaming consistently, if that makes sense. With all that being said, I will see you guys next week for the book analysis video. Bye!